6 words. That's all it took. Staying humble, but also hungry, and the entire tennis universe stopped breathing. Eala didn't just deliver a quote. She detonated a philosophy that shattered every expectation of what a champion is supposed to sound like. Nobody anticipated that a post-match press conference would birth the most replicated, most debated, most emotionally resonant sentence professional tennis has produced in a generation. Nobody predicted that 6 carefully chosen words from a 19-year-old Filipina would make seasoned journalists pause mid-sentence, make former Grand Slam champions publicly reflect on their own careers, and make millions of people across continents feel, genuinely, viscerally feel, that someone finally articulated what competing with integrity actually demands. This wasn't viral by accident. This wasn't manufactured by a PR team rehearsing sound bites in a hotel corridor. This erupted from something rarer and far more dangerous than strategy. This erupted from truth. There exists a particular breed of athlete the sports world manufactures with industrial efficiency, the kind trained from adolescence to say the correct things in the correct order with the correct emotional calibration so that every press conference produces quotable warmth without revealing anything genuinely vulnerable. Eala was never that athlete. Those who watched her develop through the junior circuit, through Barcelona's clay, through Madrid's indoor courts, through the grinding developmental years at the Rafa Nadal Academy, describe a competitor whose relationship with language mirrors her relationship with tennis itself. Deliberate, precise, stripped of unnecessary decoration. When Eala speaks, she has already considered what she intends to say, not because she fears misrepresentation, but because she respects the weight of words the way a craftsperson respects the weight of tools. This characteristic traces directly to her upbringing. Born into a family that valued education alongside aspiration, Eala absorbed early the understanding that how you carry success determines whether success carries you forward or eventually collapses beneath its own pressure. Her parents, both accomplished professionals navigating Manila's demanding social landscape, modeled a specific kind of quiet confidence, the variety that requires no external validation because its foundation rests entirely within. Tennis academies, by their nature, attempt to standardize that foundation, feed every young talent the same nutritional philosophy, the same technical blueprint, the same psychological framework for managing defeat and victory. The Nadal Academy, specifically, operates on principles of relentless discipline and unwavering respect for opponents, for the sport, for the process. Eala absorbed every element of that environment without surrendering the distinctly Filipino perspective she carried from home. The tension between those two influences, European tennis rigor and Southeast Asian emotional depth, produced something the tennis world hadn't previously encountered in quite this precise combination. A player capable of competing with the ferocity of someone who believes absolutely in her own potential, while simultaneously maintaining a groundedness that prevents that belief from curdling into arrogance. Ask anyone who encountered Eala during her developmental years: coaches, fellow players, tournament officials, academy administrators. The description emerging from each conversation contains the same paradox. She competes like someone certain of her destiny, yet carries herself like someone perpetually grateful for the opportunity. That paradox doesn't resolve itself, it intensifies as stakes escalate. By 2026, those stakes had escalated considerably. Eala had accumulated results that moved her decisively beyond promising prospect territory into the conversation about genuine contenders. Rankings climbed. Opponents adjusted their scouting reports. Opponents' coaches began delivering pre-match briefings that treated her not as a manageable obstacle, but as a legitimate threat requiring comprehensive preparation. With elevated status arrived elevated scrutiny, every victory analyzed, every defeat dissected, every press conference statement cataloged by followers numbering in millions across platforms that never sleep and never forgive imprecision. Lesser athletes, and many greater ones, statistically speaking, contract under that scrutiny. They become careful, managed, polished into something smooth and reflective that shows audiences exactly what those audiences expect to see. Nothing more, nothing unsettling, nothing genuinely surprising. Eala did the opposite. As external pressure amplified, her internal clarity sharpened, and the moment that clarity found its most precise verbal expression arrived not during a championship ceremony, not during a prepared speech, not during a structured media opportunity. It arrived, as the truest things typically do, when nobody was specifically waiting for it. And what came next, nobody in that press room was ready for. The tournament itself had been extraordinary by any measurement available. 3 weeks of competition condensed into a final fortnight that produced upsets, comebacks, and the particular theatrical tension that distinguishes major events from merely significant ones. Eala's path through the draw had demanded everything she possessed. Opponents who targeted her movement, opponents who targeted her serve, opponents who understood her forehand's potential and constructed entire tactical blueprints around neutralizing it before it could fully activate. She defeated each of them, not effortlessly, not with the clinical detachment of a dominant champion overwhelming inferior competition, but through the specific grinding intelligence of someone who refuses to allow circumstances to determine outcomes. Her semifinal, in particular, had lasted 3 hours and 21 minutes across conditions that deteriorated progressively as the afternoon wore toward evening, wind that altered ball trajectory in ways that rendered careful preparation partially irrelevant, heat that dehydrated both competitors visibly, forcing medical timeouts that interrupted rhythm precisely when rhythm mattered most, an opponent who matched Eala's determination point for point through 2 sets, forcing the deciding set into a tiebreak that concluded on a single backhand winner. Not a spectacular one, not the kind of shot that earns instant highlight status, but a perfectly placed, perfectly weighted, perfectly timed stroke that demonstrated mastery without requiring theatrics. After the trophy ceremony, which Eala received with characteristic understatement, thanking her team, her family, the tournament, and her opponent with equal specificity and genuine warmth, she proceeded to the mandatory press conference. These gatherings are, by design, formulaic. Questions follow predictable trajectories. Journalists seek quotable assessments of tactics, turning points, physical condition, and future ambitions. Champions answer with practiced grace, occasionally producing memorable lines, more frequently producing competent non-statements that satisfy protocol without igniting discussion. 30 minutes into the conference, a journalist from a Philippine sports publication asked Eala how she manages the psychological complexity of competing as a representative of a nation's tennis aspirations while simultaneously pursuing purely personal athletic achievement. The room quieted slightly. Not a dramatic hush, simply the organic settling that occurs when a question arrives carrying genuine weight. Eala paused. Not the pause of someone searching for a diplomatically safe answer, the pause of someone selecting from multiple accurate options the most honest articulation available. Then she leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I think about it constantly," she said. "The answer I've found, the only answer that actually works for me, is staying humble but also hungry. Because humility without hunger becomes complacency, and hunger without humility becomes something ugly. You need both simultaneously every single day. That's the only balance that keeps you moving forward without losing who you are. Staying humble, but also hungry."
Not a retweet, not a quick share with a fire emoji attached. A written post, 4 paragraphs, carefully composed, published without announcement during the kind of quiet Tuesday morning when social media algorithms typically bury thoughtful content beneath trending noise. Williams wrote about her own career's relationship with the precise tension Eala had named, about the seasons when hunger dominated and humility receded, and the specific costs, professional and personal, that imbalance generated. about the seasons when she deliberately overcorrected toward humility and discovered, painfully, that gratitude without ferocity produces performances that disappoint everyone, including the competitor offering them. I spent years looking for the word that describes what it actually takes, Williams wrote. She found it at 19. Respect begins to cover what I feel watching this. The internet, predictably, combusted. But beneath the combustion, beneath the viral screenshots and the comparison threads and the inevitable discourse about tennis generations and legacies and what Eala's emergence means for the sport's future, something quieter and more significant had transpired. A bridge had formed between an era defined by Williams's dominance and whatever era Eala's trajectory would ultimately produce. Not a bridge of competition, they occupied different competitive timelines, but a bridge of recognition, the acknowledgement from someone who had survived every pressure professional tennis generates that the young woman from Manila possessed something essential, not just talent, not just determination, the philosophical framework that converts talent and determination into sustained excellence without destroying the person carrying both. Graf's silence in Berlin communicated one form of recognition. Williams's 4 paragraphs communicated another. Together, they produced a consensus across tennis generations that carried the specific authority of earned perspective, speaking about confirmed potential. Eala, characteristically, responded to Williams's post with 3 sentences: gratitude, expressed without gushing, acknowledgement, delivered without false modesty, and a closing line that immediately generated its own secondary wave of attention. Your example taught me that greatness and grace aren't opposites. Thank you for proving it first. 6 words became 12. 12 expanded the conversation further, and the conversation, by this point, extended far beyond anyone's ability to contain or redirect it. What this phrase ultimately revealed wasn't about tennis. It was about something we've all been searching for. Championships fade, rankings fluctuate, records fall to newer athletes carrying fresher legs and hungrier intentions. The architecture of sporting legacy is fundamentally impermanent. Every summit eventually becomes a base camp for someone younger, stronger, more specifically prepared for the specific demands of their specific competitive era. But ideas, genuine, precisely articulated, universally applicable ideas, those compound. Staying humble but also hungry entered 2026 as a post-match press conference response and concluded its first month as a framework referenced in corporate leadership seminars, high school graduation speeches, athletic program orientation sessions, and mental health advocacy context that had never previously engaged with professional tennis. Youth coaches adopted it, not as a slogan — slogans are cheap and abundant — but as a genuine pedagogical tool for discussing the psychological balance that separates sustained development from either stagnant satisfaction or destructive obsession. A sports nutrition brand approached Eala's management about using the phrase in advertising. Her team declined. Not because the commercial opportunity lacked value, but, as a source close to the situation described, Eala felt the phrase didn't belong to her alone. It belonged to everyone who recognized themselves within it. Monetizing that recognition would diminish something that currently existed beyond ownership. That decision generated its own wave of admiration. In an era when athletes aggressively monetize every authentic moment, the choice to protect a phrase's organic power over its commercial potential communicated volumes about the values operating beneath the public persona. The most revealing response, perhaps, arrived from an unexpected direction entirely. A researcher studying athletic motivation published preliminary findings suggesting that the humble but hungry formulation described by Eala aligned with psychological research on sustainable motivation more precisely than any comparable popular articulation. That humility, specifically, functions as a buffer against the ego fragility that causes talented athletes to avoid challenges where failure seems possible, and hunger, balanced against it, prevents the grateful acceptance of sufficient performance when extraordinary performance remains achievable. In other words, Eala hadn't just found words, she had found
accurate words, words that described a real psychological mechanism with the precision that years of formal research had approached, but never quite captured in language ordinary people could carry with them. That distinction between motivational language that sounds true and language that is true explains everything about why those 6 words traveled the distance they traveled. Tennis produced them, but tennis couldn't contain them. And Alex Eala, humble enough to credit years of mentorship, hungry enough to keep competing at the level that placed her in that press room the first place, had delivered to the world a sentence that will outlast every ranking she ever achieves, every trophy she ever lifts, every record she ever establishes or breaks.